mic.
Yeah, I guess so. Plug this in. Yeah, hold on. Okay, so.
Do you want to play it, babe?
Is it? Oh, okay.
Awesome. All right. So first of all, thank you everyone for coming and joining. This is Pieter DePree from Stack Overflow. He is a technical recruiting lead there. So he handles all the technical roles. And he's here to talk to you about just kind of what to do to make yourself stand out while you're in the job search. So take it over, Pieter.
I think I've got a microphone already.
Oh, sorry.
Everybody, so first off, two quick things. One, I hate speaking in public, so bear with me. And two, I think like most of us, I'm kind of pretty emotionally and mentally drained after the last 24 hours, so we'll get through this. But this is gonna be very casual, so feel free to ask questions, interrupt me. But I'm basically gonna go, this is kind of close, right? I'm gonna drop this down. Okay, I'm basically gonna go through want to talk a little bit more about making yourselves more findable. In order to be found by companies, you've got to be findable. So I want to talk to you a little bit about ways that you can do that. But first, I'm going to kind of go through sort of why making yourself more findable on the internet matters, and kind of what our approach, kind of give you an inner window into what our approach to hiring at Stack Overflow at least looks like. And that way you can kind of see what things look like behind the scenes and what companies are doing when they're screening through applications. So. This talk, I think, is mislabeled as how to hire developers, but I guess the better way to label this would be kind of how to get hired as a developer at Stack Overflow even. So real quick, I'm going to kind of run through what our hiring process looks like and what the, kind of the way we look through applications and screen applications. But before I kind of begin, just a quick disclaimer, hiring is really tough and no company does it great. This is just our approach to doing this. So nobody does it perfect. We're no different. And I think the main thing I want to talk to you about today is just sort of how, in today's age, you can improve on sort of what's looked at as the traditional application format, which is really more of a resume, which is a horribly outdated piece of paper that really should be done away with. And then kind of how we're improving our process and helping our community get better at the way they make themselves visible on the internet. So our approach to hiring at Stack Overflow, real quickly, is just we're very objective. Developers are roles that we hire for a lot, so we have a very solid bar on kind of how we hire. And we always are very objective, hiring above or below that bar. We don't have sort of hiring committees at the end of our process. It's always sort of a single hire or no hire. And that starts with the application process. When we look at applications, they either meet the bar for what we look for in an application or they do not. So it's a very objective process. It's a very binary process, so always hire, no hire, yes or no. And we always provide very detailed feedback on why we're making that decision. It's not a subjective process at all. And the other thing we do to make sure that we're always staying objective with our interview process and our application screening is having very regular interview trainings and application screening trainings with our development team as they get up to speed on, as new hires. So our interview process, real quickly, in case you're curious, starts off with a recruiter review of your application. This is a basic screen, making sure that you're hitting the basic things that we're looking for. We base all of our applications off 5 criteria. Then once that recruiter review is completed, and if it passes that initial review, it goes on to a more deep dive with a developer on our team. So the recruiting team works very closely with our developers to screen applicants and look through your coding samples before you even enter the interview process. Then from the once you actually enter the interview process, we have a phone interview as an initial step. Then it goes into a code screen, which is kind of the can you code interview. We want to kind of see you back up what we've seen through your public artifacts online. And then it goes into 2 more technically deep interviews. One is a more academic algorithmic interview. The other is a more architectural focused interview. And then it goes into an actual product interview as well with one of our product managers. We look for all of our developers to have experience building around a product and making some of those product decisions, since we have a very small product management team and a lot of our developers are kind of tasked with taking on some of that responsibility. And then it goes into a final interview with our VP of engineering. So here's the things we look for in applications. Starting off with, we love acronyms at Stack Overflow. So we have this kind of silly acronym called TEDPIG. The I doesn't actually stand for anything, but it makes it sound nicer. And it starts off with looking at applications and making sure that all applications are targeted. That doesn't mean guessing my name and saying, hi, Peter, and then giving me a generic cover letter. It means actually going through and finding ways to discuss why you're a good fit for this position, what interests you about Stack Overflow, a story about what brought you to this point in the process. So it could be anything. I mean, I've seen people talk about how our site has impacted them in their career. They've talked about listening to one of our developers speak at a conference. They've talked about listening to our blog and podcast. A lot of people follow our CEO, Joel Spolsky. But it doesn't have to be a company as public as Stack Overflow. There's literally no company out there that you can't find or do a little research on and use that in your cover letter to make yourself stand out. People get really tired of reading kind of cut and pasted cover letters over and over and over and over and over again. So target is the first thing. Then we look at experience. For our senior developers, we look for generally about 2 years of experience, and that could be in a professional position, or it could be academically, or just maybe a ton of open source projects they've worked on that kind of get up to around that same number. That's probably the more subjective part of our screening process, but generally we look for some level of experience for our senior developers, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about what we look for in junior developers as well. Then beyond that, we look for technical depth in applications. So when we are looking through your projects, looking through your GitHub, we're looking to see, are the projects you're working on something that's interesting? Are these things that are technically deep? Are you doing things beyond just sort of calling APIs? If someone's done something that could be low-level coding or high-performance tuning, those are all things that kind of stand out. Whatever it might be, just something beyond just sort of linking APIs together and something that's kind of basic. And then we look for passionate. This is sort of the one that frustrates me the most, because this is what we're going to talk the most about later. This is the thing that's the easiest to show in an application, but it's shown the least. So there's nothing worse than seeing a developer apply to a position and just give me a cover letter and a resume with bullet points. I can't see any level of passion in that. I'm not seeing any side projects they're working on. I'm not seeing any blog that they might be working on or doing. Any talks they've given, any meetups they're participating in. There's nothing at all that's going to show me that they're actually passionate about being a developer. And the best developers are always passionate about development. That's why you all are here. So that's what we're going to focus on when we get into the GitHub and developer story as well. And then we look for gets things done. So we want to see people that have actually shipped projects. Anyone coming out of this boot camp has already shipped projects before they even leave here. So we want to see not just what projects you've worked on or not, but also what was your role in that project? What role did you take in that project to see it through to fruition? So real quick, in case you're curious, when we review applications, we really do go through all of those steps. We review all 5 of those criteria. Anyone that submits a review for an application, once it's passed the quick screen and has gone into a deeper dive, our developers go through and actually rank each of those categories. So is it targeted? Did they have the experience we're looking for? Did they show the passion we're looking for? Do they have evidence of getting things done and shipping projects? Were the projects interesting and technically, they have some technical depth to them? So it's actually ranked all the way down. And if any of those sort of explanations of why they had hit that criteria, didn't hit that criteria, aren't descriptive enough, then we can challenge that and go back and take a second look. So we've noticed a few things in this process. One of which is that it's a great system for reviewing kind of experienced active applicants. It's not so great for reviewing candidates that are just starting their developer story. So we've created some new programs to bring in more junior developers, and we with this developer story that we've put out, have made it easier for people that are starting their development career to show a little bit more beyond just their experience, what it is they've been working on and what kind of expertise they've developed so far. So for junior developers, we actually created another acronym. I told you we loved acronyms. It's the TAPS review process. T and P are the same. We still look for the targeted applications and people that are passionate about development. But then we look for people that are adaptive. So does this person show already that they have the ability to learn new technologies and take on more responsibility? And our CEO wrote a book called Smart and Gets Things Done. So we always look to hire smart people. So we're looking to see, can they code? Are they someone that's going to actually go above and beyond in the projects they're working on? Do they have that additional curiosity that's going to make them, a better developer? So these are the essential things that we look for. This is the things that every application should have, no matter where you are in your career. Always, and again, this is how we do things. I know you might have heard that Google, for example, is a company that will just throw out cover letters. They don't even look at them. At least that's the last thing I heard from them. For us, the targeted really matters. We get so many developer applications. It's the quickest and easiest screen for us to say, hey, why would we want to talk to someone that put no effort into applying? When we could talk to someone that wrote us this very nice cover letter that was explaining all the things about why they were the best fit for this position, why they were interested in Stack Overflow. So targeted cover letter is a no-brainer. Public artifacts are the thing that's, again, probably the thing that's easiest for developers to show, and it's not as common as you might think. But have you engaged on Stack Overflow? Do you have a Stack Overflow reputation? I know it's sometimes an intimidating community, so there's plenty of other ways to show passion beyond that. But yeah, things like your GitHub, Bitbucket. If you've given talks, and you can put those up on YouTube, the videos of the talks you've given. I believe you record presentations that students do in the boot camp, right? Is that a thing that's going on? So most of you, that's already something you can show. So there's again, that's just something that shows that added passion, and it's a little bit more than just a resume. And then this is the other thing too. This is one of the most frustrating things about this cover letter or the resume that's just this horribly outdated piece of paper is sort of the resume 101 books that seem to have gotten circulated sometime in the past 2 decades, and they give you all these buzzwords of, influence this or manage that or coordinated this, and it's the most useless bullet points ever. They don't actually tell you anything. As developers, you can talk in a lot of detail about the projects you've worked on. What was your role in that project? What have you shipped? And what have you completed? You can get very detailed in that project, about that project, and that's something that will stand out to employers when they're looking at your resumes. Because again, you get so used to just seeing these sort of meaningless bullet points that don't really tell you that much about the projects that a developer was working on. So yeah, detailed explanation of projects is another thing that everyone should be able to include at all times. So I want to talk to you a little bit more about the public artifacts. So in particular, 2 things that are something I think you all are familiar with. One is GitHub. So when we talk about looking for public artifacts, the most common that we see is GitHub. We're always looking at developer or applicants' GitHub profiles to see what kinds of projects they've participated in, and that's something that our developers will go into doing a deeper dive every time. But there's some things that you can do earlier on, before that deep dive. We actually start digging into code to make yourself more appealing, or make your GitHub profile more attractive to employers. And so when you're working on GitHub, this is a community. The recruiters that are looking at your application initially are probably not going to be digging into your code. That's not what they're great at. They have other skills, I'm sure. But they want to get a sense of your reputation. And one of the nice things about Stack Overflow is if you engage on there, you build a reputation score based off your peers in that community's view of how good the answers you're providing are, how good the questions that you're asking are. And so you're actually getting ranked by your peers, and that's something that's very easy for recruiters to look at. But similarly on GitHub, followers and projects that have a lot of stars on them are kind of a indicator that people in your community that are looking at your projects found them to be very useful. You have a large cohort of classmates here that could, you can be engaging with on GitHub. I'd highly recommend that everyone here be engaging with each other on GitHub, starring each other's projects, contributing to each other's projects when possible. That kind of interaction, engagement, having those extra followers and stars, and just sort of community reputation built up is going to stand out a lot when you start applying to positions. So to give you an example, I pulled up one of our developers who has a pretty active GitHub following, and so when you look through his GitHub, you're immediately seeing that, hey, he has quite a few repositories he's started. He's one that has 466 stars, 20 forks. So obviously a lot of engagement around this. I think this was a way to write CSS with JavaScript. When you're working on these projects, the README file is something that you should not undervalue. It's not just good for developers working on your projects, but when employers are looking through your project, it's a great way for you to show why you were passionate about starting this, what your thought process was, and how you approached it. Again, recruiters aren't looking through your code, but they might be looking through the README file to get more information about the project you're working on and why you're working on it, how you got there. So that is something. When you go back up here as well to John's GitHub profile, again, he has, I can look at his stars and see what other projects he's following, what he's interested in. That might be an indicator of what he's passionate about working in, what languages he wants to work in his next position. You can look through and see, he has 90 followers, so obviously the community is interested in the work he's doing. And then I can also see who he's following, and again, just for sort of a broader picture of what he's interested in. The kind of pitfall of GitHub, though, is that for a lot of people, it's not a great way to kind of present the overall picture of who you are as a developer. If you've been working for any large corporation that has proprietary or is very sensitive about proprietary private information, they're probably not going to let you show your work on GitHub or put your work out there. And some companies won't even let you work on side projects because it might be an indicator of or a clue into what you're working on internally in the company. So different companies can be very sensitive about that. So there's other ways that you can form your sort of online profile to show who you are as a developer. And one of those ways is on Stack Overflow. We recently launched, just show of hands, everyone in here uses Stack Overflow, right? At least as a consumer of information on the site. How many of you actually have a profile and are a registered user of Stack Overflow? Okay, so a few. So those of you that aren't, even if you don't participate or contribute, certainly I would recommend creating a profile. Once you create a profile, you can also create your developer story. And what we are looking at this as is kind of coding central. Our thought process is you're more than your resume. A resume doesn't tell you much, but by kind of creating this developer story, we're putting together a more holistic picture of who you are as a developer and kind of your story into your career as a developer. So we basically got rid of the bullet points and all the alphabet soup, and sort of the random interest sections and such of your resume, and we kind of created this timeline that basically shows how you kind of journeyed into being a developer. And with this timeline, you can actually add all sorts of different things. So you can add not only your experience, it's not just about what companies you worked at and how prestigious your title was. That's not what we really think shows who's a great developer. So positions still need to be on there. It still is going to tell an employer a lot. But beyond that, we've suggested all kinds of other things you include in your developer story. So blogs or videos. We have a place for you to include open source projects you've worked on. You can include answers that you've contributed that are sort of top answers or impressive answers on Stack Overflow. We have a way that you can link to a Google Play Store or iTunes Store to present or show off an app that you might have already shipped. You can obviously include your education on there, any certifications, and really anything else about you that shows off something you've done in your career to kind of build your experience. And so this is one of our sort of more senior developers, John Chan, who is a developer at Stack Overflow. Also, you can see he links to a blog where he talks about how he led the creation of our new blog at Stack Overflow. A few other blog posts he's put in there, what he did before Stack Overflow. He has a side project he works on called Bento. I don't know if any of you have ever seen that, but that's a great learning tool for learning new languages. It sort of aggregates all kinds of different resources for different languages, but he's got that in here as well. Discards, who you saw earlier, was on his GitHub. And so again, this is sort of, again, coding central. This is a way to kind of put yourself out there and show what you've done. I like to think of developers kind of like artists. If you're trying to hire a painter, you're not going to just look at a piece of paper that says 7 years of artist experience, then manage coordination of paint onto canvas or whatever else. It doesn't really. I'm not going to be confident they can actually do what I want them, or be at the level that we're looking for to paint whatever we want them to paint. So likewise the journalists. Just because someone says they're a writer, it's much more useful to see what they've actually written. Designers, you hire designers based off their portfolio, not the bullets on their resume. So developers should be no different. Developers should be including everything they've done, showing off your work, and again making themselves more findable on the internet, so that you're not just in a situation where you've got to just submit a paper resume into an employer. So that's kind of our thought process with Developer Story and why we've created that. The nice thing is that especially for someone that's starting their story, Developer Story is a great way to show things beyond just experience. You may not have worked for a lot of, you may not have had senior developer titles or worked for a lot of large tech companies, but you can focus on projects you did in school. Coming out here, you've already done all kinds of projects. Your Keystone project, you've given presentations that are videotaped that you can put those videos and link those to your developer story. Any lectures you've done, books you've read, you can link to Amazon books with a review of maybe a book on Amazon that you read that taught you something new or that you found very useful. So again, it's sort of sky's the limit. You can put all kinds of things on there because you've done a lot already before even graduating from a boot camp. So it's a lot great chance to kind of paint that picture of who you are as a developer and make yourself more findable for employers. So that's kind of the main points of my talk. Hopefully I got through that without too much difficulty. Any questions, or did any of that not make sense?
Exactly do you mean when you're using the term shipped?
Shipped. Oh, so yeah, okay. So projects that you've put out there, projects you've completed. So yeah, I guess you're not actually shipping a project when you're doing the projects here at school. So it's any project you've completed and you can point to that's a completed project that is done and is something you can say, hey, this is what I contribute to that.
How important is a personal portfolio?
What do you mean?
Like if, let's say you have a portfolio that showcases your skill and also all your other projects.
Like your own web page you're creating that is showing all this?
Yeah. So the question. So the question is, how important is your own portfolio in regards to, in addition, or to this, or not?
So I think they're sort of trying to accomplish the same thing. Making your own portfolio is great, and honestly, that's a whole other project you can point to. I mean, the fact that you've created that web page, you put all your work on there, it tells you a lot about, or an employer a lot about how you work, how you've kind of approached the UI for that website, whatever else. So it's just as useful, and I think that's a great project to undertake. The difference is that it's not as easily findable as your developer story on a site like Stack Overflow or your work that you're putting out on GitHub. I think in the context of starting the job search and interacting with employers, again, it kind of comes back to just being findable. And a website is something you can point to, but it's also nice to be kind of involved in these communities that are where employers are looking for developers.
What would you say is what is your best piece of advice for someone who is a completely junior developer, meaning we've never had work experience in the development world before, and so maybe we only have like 2 or 3 projects that we've built at full stack, but nothing else related to development?
Yep. So I think one of the best things you can do to really show off that passion and kind of document the work that you're doing is create a blog about hey, your journey into development. You are being honest that hey, I'm new to this field, but this is what I'm doing along the way to make myself a better developer. And the best developers never stop learning. So it doesn't matter whether you are 3 months in, 6 months in, a year in, you've already found a job. There's no reason why you would stop working on that kind of project and stop learning new technologies, challenging yourself in new areas. So yeah, I think a blog is a terrific way of just sort of talking about your experience so far, documenting what you're learning. I think it honestly is sort of a nice learning tool anyways to be kind of working on a project like that and keeping it up to date. And then on top of that, again, working on, as you're kind of learning new technologies or working on new projects, putting that out on GitHub when possible, putting that out in open source communities, or just contributing to open source communities that are already out there is a great way to just kind of build that experience. But yeah, I think blogs are a great way to do that. Just put anything that kind of has something you can point to that's going to make you sort of make you stand out compared to other applicants in the field that may not be putting that extra effort in. So.
Could you talk a bit more about that apprenticeship program that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, so I guess this is very Stack Overflow specific. But when we were a younger company, we had much more aggressive product deadlines, and we had this great community of developers that we were hiring from. And so we were never great about hiring junior developers, and that was a fault of ours. That was something we were trying really hard to fix, because I think it's really important just for the culture of the company to be able to hire different levels of experience. And so we weren't quite sure how to approach that. So we actually partnered with Full Stack Academy and Grace Hopper last summer to hire our first 2 apprentices, which both have now started full-time with the company and are basically at this point at the same level as all the rest of the developers in the company. We don't consider them junior developers. They graduate from the apprenticeship company and they become full stack developers at Stack Overflow. So you can see this is Jisu's developer story. Jisu is the apprentice we hired from Grace Hopper last year, and so when you look through, she shows her experience here at both her academic background as well as her early experience in her career before coming over to Grace Hopper, and then she put her projects that she worked on here. I think this is her cornerstone or graduation project at Grace Hopper, the Robo Mayhem, and then she put her Grace Hopper experience here as well. And then she became a developer apprentice at Stack Overflow. This probably timeline is slightly out of whack. But then she also wrote a blog that was very well received about her experience as an apprentice at Stack Overflow. And then you can see some of the other top answers that she's put out on the Stack Overflow community. I think she gave a talk here, actually, the alumni spotlight here at Grace Hopper that she put on there as well. I think it's probably, I guess it's a video that she did, or maybe she just put the transcript on there. And then her full-time position as a developer at Stack Overflow. So this is someone that's less than a year into her career as a developer, and you can already see how much she has on there that kind of tells you a little bit more about her experience and what she's done so far. But yeah, so the apprenticeship program is something we ran last summer, and we're hoping to run again this year or next summer, depending on what our headcount hiring goals look like.
So thinking about all the awesome stuff that I've gotten from Stack Overflow, and also about blog posts, with like commenting and asking questions, like the protocol is to really do the research and make sure somebody else hasn't asked your exact question. Mm-hmm. And it seems like there's this interplay between getting over the apprehension of like, am I the imposter, or do I have enough to can I actually ask this question and participate in the community? So it also relates to blog posts, and can you maybe give some advice to somebody who's really junior who doesn't want to ask a dumb question, but also maybe pick a good topic to create content and get yourself out there, because you kind of have to just get over that in order to be a participant in the whole discourse? Sure.
So I would say with the Stack Overflow community, we are working on solving some of those, the intimidating nature of that community. It can be at certain times. Stack Overflow community, yes. So I think there's a big difference between your own blog and asking questions already been asked in the Stack Overflow community. When you're creating your own blog, I honestly would say, forget about who cares. If it's valuable to you, it's valuable to you, and that's it's something that's documenting your journey, as a developer. So when it comes to your blog, I wouldn't worry about blogging about something that's not interesting to someone, or that you don't think it's going to be interesting to someone else. This is sort of just the nature of development in general. We were talking about stars and GitHub earlier. Development is kind of, I don't know, I heard someone relate it to kind of being like music. When you are listening to the radio, you're hearing only a very small sampling of songs, but those songs get repeated and repeated and repeated. And so when you go on GitHub, you'll see repositories that kind of hit this critical mass where suddenly everyone's just starring them. But most of the other repositories or projects on GitHub, have 1 or 2 stars. So any project that has more than 3 or 4 stars on it stands out. And so I think there's so many projects that are objectively interesting on GitHub. There's so many projects that are out there, but what's interesting to one person is not going to be interesting to someone else. So again, if it's interesting to you, it's interesting to you. Put it on your blog, and again, just that passion and the fact that you're talking about it is what's going to be interesting to an employer. So.
I screwed it up. There we go. Okay, so this is maybe a broad question, or maybe it's specific to the way your development team and recruiters operate. I think most of the applications we build are built with teams, whether we're co-located or they're people from across the world collaborating on a project. when your developers review the code, obviously there's people working in different areas of the application, the project. And I don't think as a developer for most large-scale frameworks, libraries, that they know every aspect of it. So I'm wondering, what perspective do your developers who vet candidates take? Do they look at all the code? Do they look specifically at that developer's commits in the project? And then when they talk to someone, hey, what did you write here? Do they expect someone to talk about the broad sense of the tool, or to say, hey, this is what I built and I'll explain to you what's going on over here?
Yeah, so it's mainly looking at the individual commits. And again, that's not something that they're spending an hour doing. They're looking to make sure it exists. They're looking to see, looking at a few samples to get a sense of, what your abilities are. And then, we'll suss out the rest of the interview process. During the interview process, if they ask you about a project, so you're saying if they're asking you about a project you worked on with a team on GitHub, yeah, if you can talk about what you contributed to that project in detail, then that's more than enough. That's all we're looking for. We don't need you to know every single aspect of the project. When I've watched demos here, everyone talks about the part of the project that they owned, and that's all we're looking for.
Cool. Can you hear me? Oh,
Yep.
there you go. So I just had a question. Are there any specific technologies or frameworks you guys look for in hires?
Absolutely not. So our mindset is that if you are an expert in one stack, there's the best developers 2 weeks and you can learn a new stack, and then a little bit longer and you can get up to speed and be proficient in it. We look for expertise in one area, and then we're more than happy to train you into our stack. I mean, that also might be partially because we are a Microsoft shop, and so that's sort of just out of necessity. But yeah, we very much are happy if you're coming from any background. Many of our developers started and never worked in C# or VC before.
Yeah, what's your favorite part about working at Stack Overflow?
Well, recruiting is easy. No, honestly, I think it's kind of, we have a CEO that wrote a book called Smart and Get Things Done. So when I came over to work at Stack Overflow, what made me want to come over and work there was our CEO literally wrote the book on how to hire and retain technical talent based off what he learned from the previous companies that he'd started. And so having a chance to kind of work for a company that's so employee-centric and knows what developers are looking for in a position, it makes me happy to be selling this position, or happy to be kind of hiring for a company that I know is going to treat everyone very, very well. So that's probably, as a recruiter, the easiest answer to that. Beyond that, the free lunches are great. Nice office.
So is Stack Overflow only located in New York City, or do you have other locations where you are looking to hire people?
Yeah, so we actually are very open about locations. So we have 3 brick and mortar locations. One's in London, one's in Denver. Our headquarters are here in New York. London and Denver are primarily sales and marketing offices. And then New York, most of our executive team, quite a few of our technical team, and a large sales team are all located here as well. But we have developers working everywhere from California to Israel and Alaska to Brazil and everywhere in between. We have product managers, working from Hawaii to Germany. Our team is largely distributed. So we are, I want to say that as a company, we're about 25% remote, but when you remove sales and marketing from that, which we like to have them in our offices, and look at just the developers and technical team, I think we're about 75% remote. So we have a few developers working here in the New York office, but there's no strategic reason they need to be. It's just that, in New York, it's nice to get out of your apartment and have your dedicated office space. So, very distributed teams.
Hi. So what percentage of the developers are women?
So right now we have 45 developers on the team, and I think we currently have, I should have the answer ready faster. I think we're currently 5 women on the development team. So that's something that we are working on and trying to increase the sort of ratio there. That's something we're working on very actively.
I mean, I imagine with Stack Overflow it's a little different, but with technical recruiters in general, do you look more for someone's contributions, or like if they have really awesome projects but that are more self-contained, is one more valued than the other?
So whether or not it's better to sort of start your own repository or contribute to larger open source projects?
Or to work on your own projects that don't really that are kind of cool but don't really contribute?
Yeah, so I was just talking to before I came to give this talk, I asked that exact question to one of our engineering managers and say, what are your thoughts on this? Do you have a really preference on one or the other? And he said, absolutely not. They both tell you different things. Working on large open source projects or working on team projects tell you a lot about someone's kind of show you a little bit about someone's ability to work with a team, especially when we're hiring for an asynchronous distributed development team. It's nice to see how they're working online in those environments. But at the same time, looking at someone's individual projects, that's kind of comes back to that passion piece. The best developers are always kind of finding cool ways to solve everyday problems, and that usually comes in the form of sort of smaller projects that we might find on their GitHub, which is something that stands out to us too.
What's the ratio of the developer who didn't have a CS degree, or someone who like us, bootcamp grads, or developer who teach themselves?
I don't have an exact answer for that. I would like to venture a guess to say it's probably about 50% at best have CS degrees. One of our engineering managers was a music major. Quite a few of our developers don't have, just were already making their own projects in high school and kind of just kept on from there, and never even went to school for CS. But yeah, we have quite a few that were just other random majors that kind of moved into development later, and then quite a few that just started programming when they were younger and just kept at it from there. So yeah, it's not, we don't require CS degrees or even look for that. It's sort of a non-indicator for us.
And then did you find any weakness of them?
No. So yeah, that's something we've seen no correlation between someone that has a CS degree and someone that went to school for something completely different. It's the correlation's more on were they working on significant projects before starting at Stack Overflow. A CS degree gives you a lot of theoretical concepts, but I think honestly the experience you're getting coming out of a boot camp is more valuable to you stepping into a job than most CS majors coming into their first position. So anybody else?
I just wanted to ask, so you mentioned that most of the developers were full stack developers. Do you also specifically hire just front end or back end developers, or do you make a distinction?
Yeah, so we as a company have always required all of our developers to be full stack developers. Effectively, you end up finding there's developers on our team that have preferences for one or the other. But if you're purely interested in only doing front end or back end, our team's not going to be the right place for you, just because we need someone that can kind of take on whatever project they need to be working on at the time, and usually that ends up being a little bit of both. Also, they're working so closely with our designers, and many of them, I told you we had a very small product management team, so that front end experience becomes very valuable on certain projects that don't have dedicated designers to them or product managers that are kind of working on that. So cool. Is that everyone's? Right. Well, if anyone has any questions they want to ask me afterwards, I'll be around for a little bit. So more than happy to talk to you later.